Good evening, everyone, and welcome. My name is Liz McGill. I'm the president of the University of Pennsylvania, and I'm just thrilled to see all of you here. I am pleased and very proud to be able to welcome to Penn, on behalf of the entire university community in Philadelphia and worldwide, His Excellency Dr. Mokgweetsi Masisi, the President of the Republic of Botswana. I am equally pleased to say that the University of Pennsylvania and Botswana are not new to one another. Indeed, I think it's fair that we are old friends. The Botswana-UPenn partnership, and of course here at Penn we must have an acronym for that. We call it BUP, or BUP for short, is more than 2 decades old now. This relationship was established in the year 2001 to address an epidemic of HIV/AIDS in Botswana. BUP works in partnership with both the University of Botswana and the Botswanan Ministry of Health, and together we have produced high-quality research and education with a strong emphasis on improvements in clinical outcomes. Our partnership has also allowed exchanges between our medical residents and our students, which have benefited both of our nations tremendously. This past July, Botswana announced it had reached the UN AIDS HIV service target. This means that 95% of all people living with HIV are aware of their status, 95% of those aware of their status receive treatment, and 95% of people receiving treatment have undetectable levels of HIV. This was achieved a full 4 years before the original 2025 target date. In 2021, the WHO awarded Botswana silver tier status for lowering the rate of mother-to-child HIV transmission to less than 5% and providing prenatal care and antiretroviral treatment to more than 90% of pregnant women living with HIV. All of us who know the history of the AIDS epidemic know just how remarkable these numbers are. And they are not the only remarkable numbers to come from Botswana. The oldest multi-party democracy in Africa, Botswana is admired for so many things, including its uninterrupted civilian leadership, its progressive social policies, and significant capital investment. These traditions have created one of the most stable and vibrant economies in Africa. It is also a nation that travelers around the globe have on their list of places to see to visit the very famous Kalahari, one of Africa's largest national parks. The friendship between Penn and Botswana encompasses more than just a highly successful medical partnership, although it is an extraordinary medical partnership. Currently, nearly 100 Penn faculty report more than 200 projects or activities engaging with the country of Botswana. We are especially excited that the first Penn Global Seminar in Botswana will run in the spring of 2024. This evening's event is yet another opportunity to strengthen the ties between Botswana, its leadership, and this university. So I not only have the great privilege of welcoming to Penn President Masisi, it is also my fondest hope that President Masisi feels at least a little bit at home and part of the Penn family here today. The distinguished president is emphasizing the distinguished part of this second annual lecture in African Studies. Luckily, we are in great hands today for this conversation. Penn Compact Professor of Africana Studies, Wale Adebanwi, is a renowned scholar of contemporary African social and political thought. Born and educated in Nigeria, he has made his mark across 3 continents, starting with Africa, then Europe, where he started writing for Tribune magazine at the age of 16 and went on to become a professor at the University of Oxford. Finally, here in North America, where to our great joy and benefit, he joined the Penn faculty 2 years ago. With such renown and such a geographically diverse career, he is often asked by younger people the secret of his success. Here's a response, I quote, "A kind of good fortune and luck comes out of absolute persistence. Your persistence may not always be rewarded, but sometimes when your persistence meets with good luck, it makes it look bigger than it is. I know that the conversation that is about to ensue will be lively, engaging, thought-provoking, and enlightening for everyone. It's now my pleasure to introduce a phenomenal Penn teacher, scholar, and leader, Dr. Camille Charles. Not only a phenomenal leader, I am quick to say she is also a leader who wears so many hats at the University of Pennsylvania. She is the Walter H. and Lenore C. Annenberg Professor of Social Sciences, Professor of Sociology and Africana Studies, Chair of the Department of Africana Studies, and the inaugural faculty co-director of Penn First Plus, our university hub for first-generation and low-income students. Dr. Charles' latest book is called Young, Gifted, and Diverse: Origins of the New Black Elite, in which she and her co-authors confront and challenge assumptions about a monolithic Black experience, especially among college students. She is one of our foremost scholars of racial inequality, and Penn is incredibly fortunate to have her. So please give a very warm welcome to our own Dr. Charles.
Good evening. On behalf of the Center for Africana Studies, I'm pleased to welcome you all to our second annual Distinguished Lecture in African Studies. With generous support from the president of the university, the Distinguished Lecture in African Studies started in 2022. The first in the series was delivered by the first Black person to win the Nobel Prize in Literature, Nigeria's Professor Wale Adebanwi. We're particularly excited about this year's talk as we're celebrating 50 years of Africana Studies at the University of Pennsylvania. And as we celebrate more than 50 years of Black studies here, we are pleased and honored to welcome His Excellency Dr. Mokgweetsi Masisi, President of the Republic of Botswana. The Republic of Botswana achieved independence in 1966, the same year that students began fighting for Black studies here in the United States. Thus, in some ways, Black studies and the Republic of Botswana share an anniversary. Thank you. As you are likely aware, both before and since that year, our world has been challenged by endless examples of conflict, violence, and corruption anywhere that we point on the globe. Botswana is one of the few countries that has remained above the fray. In our efforts to grapple with these aforementioned challenges, it's imperative that Africana Studies and the Penn community highlight people, institutions, organizations, and governments who may provide solutions to those protracted problems. Given this charge, it's important for us to understand how Botswana has managed its natural resources, maintained economic growth, and sustained plural democracy. It's also critical to be aware of the role that traditional culture plays in Botswana's governance, strategies for conflict resolution, and transparency. Botswana's example offers us useful templates to reflect on. Today, we're honored to welcome President Masisi, the first sitting president of Botswana, to visit the University of Pennsylvania. President Masisi earned bachelor's degrees in history and English from the University of Botswana in 1984 and would return to the University of Botswana in 1987 to serve as a curriculum specialist before pursuing graduate studies at Florida State University, where he earned a master's degree in social sciences education and instructional system design in 1989. After returning to Botswana and serving as the National Coordinator for Social Studies Education, President Masisi worked as a project officer for UNICEF in Botswana. In 2009, he was appointed Assistant Minister for Presidential Affairs and Public Administration with the Botswana Democratic Party, and then Minister of Education and Skills Development. His Excellency's experiences in education and politics earned him the Vice Presidency of Botswana in 2014, serving under President Ian Khama. In 2018, His Excellency became the 5th President of Botswana. Today, President Masisi will discuss good governance, democracy, and the management of natural resources in Botswana, lessons for other resource-rich countries in the world. Following his lecture, His Excellency will be joined for a conversation with Professor Wale Adebanwi, Presidential Penn Compact Professor in Africana Studies. Again, thank you all for joining me in welcoming President Masisi as he comes to this stage.
Thank you very much for your kindness. Thank you very much for your kindnesses and a pretty scary introduction. Professor Elizabeth Les McGill, President of the University of Pennsylvania. Dr. Wale Adebanwi, President and Professor of African Studies and in the Africana Department. Professor Camille Charles, Director of the Center for Africana Studies and the Chair of the Department of African Studies. Distinguished university staff members, my Minister for Foreign Affairs, Permanent Secretary, Ambassador, senior officials from the Botswana government, students here present, ladies and gentlemen, a very good afternoon. I have the greatest honor to convey my sincere gratitude to the President of the University of Pennsylvania, Professor Elizabeth Les McGill, for the very warm welcome extended to me and my delegation to the UN campus. Let me also extend my heartfelt gratitude to Professor Camille Charles, the Director of the Center for Africana Studies and the Chair for the African Department, the Department of African Studies, for the invitation to speak on good governance, democracy, and the management of natural resources in Botswana, lessons for other resource-rich countries in the world. Dr. Wale Adebanwi, a person I know fairly well, President and Professor of Africana Studies and the African Department, I immensely thank you and your staff for making this visit possible. My profound commendation also goes to you, Penn, for recognizing and highlighting the Botswana success story. This is a story of transformation from a seemingly hopeless desert to a developing upper-middle income country with aspirations to reach high income status by the year 2036. We value your partnership on this new journey. This lecture series provides an opportunity to share our own story with the hope that others will find inspiration in it and build a stronger coalition for global progress. It is critical to point out that Botswana's democratic ideals and economic transformation are underpinned by principles of democracy, development, unity, self-reliance, and botho, as we pronounce it. If you struggle, you can say botho. But it simply means humility, and most importantly, our spirit of therisano, consultation, which is deeply embedded in our culture. The practice of consultation is centered around our khotla system. And a khotla is a traditional village assembly point where everybody has a say and there is respect for everybody's rights. The khotla system promotes tolerance, it promotes inclusion, freedom of assembly and speech. It also promotes human rights, as well as collective decision-making. This means that our development efforts are perpetually shared opportunities and challenges. This system of governance has been our nation's social contract, forged through unyielding adherence and respect of the Constitution, which is the bedrock of Botswana's development trajectory since the country gained its independence, as you heard, in 1966. Botswana's founding fathers understood the intrinsic value of respecting this and respecting this particular social contract by maintaining free and fair elections, by maintaining a multi-party democracy, by promoting human and property rights, and equitable distribution of natural resources. At the time of our independence in 1966, Botswana was among the 25 poorest nations of the world. Some observers even went to the extent of questioning the viability of our existence as a sovereign state. However, our founding fathers were determined to venture into the unknown with the conviction that there lay beyond the visible horizon greater hope for what some described as a trackless wasteland at that time. It is therefore my distinct honor and privilege to share a few thoughts on a topic that illustrates confidence by trusted friends like UPenn in Botswana's system of governance, in Botswana's system of democracy and prudent management of our limited natural resources. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, prudent management of resources presupposes the very existence of natural resources. In the case of Botswana, the natural resources have always been in the form of our natural endowments, namely mineral deposits, the flora and the fauna, the land and its people. The primary focus with regard to these has been the people as the owners, the beneficiaries, and the driving force behind the exploitation of such resources. Our founding fathers were fully convinced that to better manage the limited resources at our disposal, a constitutional and multi-party democratic republic had to be in place. A republic premised on the primacy of respect for and commitment to the rule of law was best suited to take the country forward. This became exceptionally valuable for Botswana following the discovery of diamond deposits shortly after, and thankfully, our independence. Your guess is as good as mine. I wouldn't be here. And many of us wouldn't be here neither. Natural endowments in Botswana are found all over the country. At the inception of our republic, we deliberately made a choice that every deposit and other riches found on our land will be regarded as a collective national good. So even if you own land in Botswana, you only own the crust of the land and the right to use it for the purpose intended. And if I found anything precious, it doesn't belong to you. It's a well-embraced collective policy. This was born out of the realization that not every piece of the territory will be equally gifted. As such, each and every one of our constitutive areas agreed that resources found in their area will be held in custody and utilized by the central government for the benefit of all citizens. In this regard, the Mines and Minerals Act is a key piece of legislation, amongst others, that create the healthy landscape for mineral wealth, exploitation, and creation. Through the Mines and Minerals Act, the mineral wealth in the country is vested in the state. The process of project development from discovery to mine development is clearly laid out in legislation with clear, predictable, understandable regulations and expectations. This is probably one of the major reasons Botswana has been able to achieve tremendous economic growth from being one of the poorest countries at independence to a high middle-income country and economy it is today. It may well also be the reason why we're here. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, Botswana has also implemented an annual national mineral accounting in partnership with the Wealth Accounting and Valuation of Ecosystem Services, WAVES, which provides information on the performance of mineral commodities for both forecasting and planning purposes, as well as for policy formulation. Our mineral policy is also aligned with other key and relevant policies that are driven by regional governments and the continent, such as the Southern Africa Development Community, or SADC, Mining Protocol, and the African Union Mining Vision. Botswana's natural resources are therefore for development and will therefore be for development always, forever, and ever. While the discovery of mineral resources in some parts of the African continent became what is regarded as a resource curse, Botswana's natural resources and the discovery of diamonds became a resource blessing for the country to date. The Botswana mining story is characterized by the longest running public-private partnership between the government of the Republic of Botswana and, yes, you know, the De Beers Group. Our desire is to continue to strengthen and reinvent our relationship with De Beers. And we are hard at it as we speak, with the objective to see our people play a significant role throughout the diamond value chain, not just in the upstream mining activities, where we have produced some of the world's best mining and metallurgical engineers, maintenance engineers, diamond valuers, etc., not to mention mining ministers, one of whom is now our ambassador. But also in the mid and the downstream processes, where there's greater value addition, leveraging on technology, innovation, pricing, and marketing amongst key soft skills. The exploitation of Botswana's mineral resources has been a key factor in the development of Botswana since her independence in 1966. Botswana is endowed with mineral resources characterized by the abundance of diamonds and coal resources. Other minerals mined include copper and silver, copper nickel, industrial minerals, soda ash, iron ore, and gold. This sector will continue to play a significant role in our economy. However, there is a strong focus to diversify our economy both within and away from this sector. To date, revenues derived from the mining sector, particularly diamond mining, have helped the government of Botswana to invest heavily in infrastructure development, including but not limited to education, to health, water, and roads, thus laying the foundation for the country's future transformation, reducing over-dependence on the extractive resource-based economy. The heavy investment in education since the 1980s laid the foundation for the knowledge-based economy, which the government is vigorously pursuing. Our enduring democracy has ensured that accountability through checks and balances, commitment to the rule of law, and the separation of powers are fully enshrined in our national constitution. This view reflects our strong conviction that a functional democratic system will ensure that the primary shareholders, our people, are at the epicenter of the formation and the functionality of the structures of governance. The government of Botswana has established independent governance institutions such as the Independent Electoral Commission, the Auditor General, the Directorate of Public Prosecutions, the Directorate on Corruption and Economic Crime, the Ombudsman, and the Public Procurement Regulatory Authority, PPRA, to inculcate a culture of accountability and transparency. We have also established a parliamentary oversight body called the Public Accounts Committee, which monitors the use of government funds, and as per the regulations of Parliament, the rules of Parliament, is axiomatically chaired by the leader of the opposition. Our success in the prudent management of resources could also be attributed to an elaborate system of development planning that the country adopted at independence. We have consistently ensured that we have national development plans, NDPs, executed every 6 years through an annual national budget, but soon to be every 5 years. The fundamental planning objectives set out in national development plans since Botswana's independence have placed emphasis on sustained development, rapid economic growth, economic independence, and social justice. In addition, we have a national vision, currently Vision 2036, which sets out long-term goals as to the direction the country intends to take. The aspirations of our national vision are in line with the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. Since independence, we have, as a country, endeavored to put citizens at the center of the management of all our resources. In conclusion, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, I wish to state that the government of Botswana continues to prioritize good governance, democracy, and the management of natural resources as a way of life, which is reflected in the country's stellar ratings in development indicators ranging from controlling diseases, provision of clean drinking water, development of ICT infrastructure, lowering mortality levels among children, high literacy rates, and the attainment of an upper middle income country we are today. I sincerely wish to thank the University of Pennsylvania, particularly the Department of Africana Studies, for hosting this important lecture, and above all, thank you for being such a wonderful audience. Apulai.
Yes, sir.
Oh, I'll take this one.
Yeah. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Please.
Oh.
Okay? Oh, okay. You want a photo?
Oh, he wants another picture? There you go.
Thank you.
I like the way they applaud, as if it would come out in the picture.
Thank you very much, Mr. President, for that wonderful talk. I would love to start in the spirit of Boto. Do I get that right?
Right, you got it.
Humility, okay. You've laid out the factors that are responsible for the comparative success of Botswana. When you look at the situation across the continent, particularly resource-rich countries, Botswana's experience has been unique. Now, some of the countries in Africa, some of them resource-rich, some that are not resource-rich, have some of the elements that you've laid out and have not been the kind of success story that Botswana is. So I'm wondering, what is the single most important factor that you think is responsible among all the other factors for Botswana's unique success in the management of our natural resources, in good governance, and in the sustenance of democracy?
Aside the ingredients I've laid out, a critical differentiator is peace. Peace, peace, peace. Because with peace, you are able to resolve whatever challenges you have. With peace, you are able to attract investment. With peace, you are able to reproduce human capital. With peace, you are able to grow. So the absence of peace is a huge setback. And we in Botswana live peace, dream peace, and have no known enemies.
Thank you, Mr. President. In 2019, the High Court decriminalized homosexuality, and you fully supported that. But your Attorney General, initially decided that they were going to, appeal the decision. I'm wondering why the Attorney General says so, and why, you took a strong position in support of decriminalization, and what is the state of affairs now? Especially, perhaps the Attorney General has been convinced otherwise, but I want to understand why you were strongly in support of this, thereby joining about 20 other countries in Africa that have decriminalized homosexuality.
What might seem like a paradox, for Botswana, it is normal. I am not the Attorney General. I'm not a lawyer. I will not speak on behalf of the Attorney General. But let me give you the context and give you the full picture of Botswana. Botswana is made up of a people who firmly believe in the realization of their rights. And one of those is the right for their opinion to be heard. The Botswana are people who come from a pretty conservative past with respect to their beliefs in the expression of sexuality. And it is honest on my part to say that many in Botswana do not support the toleration of homosexuality. But the Attorney General rightfully challenged the decision of the High Court because, as I said earlier on, what might seem a paradox is not for us, it's normal. The Attorney General needed to seek finality. And we, being a country with deep-rooted respect for the rule of law, needed this question settled. And the only way to settle it is to take it to the highest level court, which he did. And as per oath of office that I took, I am the protector of the rights of every citizen and the ultimate defender and protector of the decisions of our courts. And so when our highest court spoke, my job is to comply. So I called the national leadership of our gay and lesbian groupings, and I told them in their face that I will support them and they will be defended. I said that because I knew many would be upset. And it was interesting, very interesting, when we had a constitutional review, the constitutional process going around all the country, many spoke very strongly against the decision of the High Court, the appeals court. But the appeals court ruling remains, and if the constitution were to be changed, it'll be another matter. But for now, every gay person in Botswana is protected by this president.
What has been the reaction? In some parts of Africa where you've had this debate, there have been a lot of pressure coming from even outside of the continent. The American evangelical community has been very influential in East Africa and the rest. What has been your experience in terms of the reactions, both especially from external forces who, which has been promoting, anti-gay laws in Africa? Have you faced, any kind of, blowback particularly from these very powerful forces, particularly in the United States?
Well, we face a raft of influences, both in support of the freedom of the gay community and those who are anti. We even got our community of gay and lesbian persons receiving financial support to, entrench themselves and support themselves. We live in a global community, a global world. And so with our freedoms in Botswana, we tend to manage to tolerate such expressions. But at the end of the day, all said and done, it'll be we who decide what we want. And the values that we want to protect, the laws that we put in place, while being fully mindful of the international standards, particularly with respect to human rights.
Thank you. Illegal poaching in Africa poses a serious threat to biodiversity, and it has led to the decline in Africa's savanna elephants, with almost a third wiped out between 2007 and 2014. And Botswana is home to the world's largest elephant population, and your country is a popular tourist destination for most people, partly because of the concentration of wildlife. Even though many people agree, that the shoot-to-kill anti-poaching policy put in place by your predecessor was quite extreme, but many people wonder why you decided to remove, the limitations that had been placed on, the hunting of, elephants, particularly in Botswana. Would you explain why this decision was taken?
Yeah, you nearly had me a little confused because you started by saying illegal anti-poaching. Sorry, illegal poaching.
Yes, illegal poaching.
I've never known of legal poaching. But I do get the question. You see, Botswana is one of the most water-deprived countries on the African continent. I think second to Namibia, right? And but curiously, we are home to the largest herd of wildlife in the wild in the world. Can you imagine why that would be? It's a simple expression of the success of our conservation policies. The elephants are very smart. They vote with their feet. They go where there's peace. But no, nature, as would have it, has limits in its carrying capacity. And so when we, unlike many countries in the world, and I dare you to show me one, have reserved close to 40% of our country for conservation. 40%, that's a big giveaway, right? Over and above that, the range in which elephants forage has gone way in excess of that 40%, and invariably comes into place human-wildlife conflict. We are a burgeoning economy. We are a developing country. We are vastly populated. We have limited resources. And many of our people are poor. And so when they eke out a living, plowing their field, herding their livestock, they sadly, at times, come face to face with the largest living mammal on Earth. You don't need to be a rocket scientist to know who wins that conflict. And it pains me as head of state, when I am the defender of my people, when they get mauled by such creatures in the peace of providing a living for their families in land allocated to them legitimately. What do you do? And those who scream at rooftops don't even have an elephant. I've offered to give away at no cost just 20 elephants for them to go and keep them in the way as they preach us to keep them, and see what happens. You know, how do you earn your living in Philadelphia? You go to your office. You know, you drive or you take a commute. What happened if you came across an elephant on your way to work? What do the community say here? And so we have a number of choices. The hunting ban, as it was not helpful. It was detrimental. It was decimating our people. It was decimating the rangeland and water resources and infrastructure. And you know, you can't have a zero toleration of unlimited population growth of such species. There was an elephant that had to be put down in the capital city of Gaborone a few years ago. So they went that far. And so we had to put in place a controlled hunting policy while trying very hard to manage these other elephants. We had to resuscitate and ask for further assistance, as I do now, for our transnational conservation area, that range between Botswana, Namibia, Angola, Zambia, and Zimbabwe, one of the largest in the world, if not the largest. The CASA, to open up new territory for these elephants, magnificent as they are, to roam freely. But I keep telling you, elephants vote with their feet. Sadly, in some of Angola, they're still trying to find money to demine. Again, the absence of peace, where elephants experience the hardships of a landmine exploding, they don't come back. Again, you know the history, recent history of Namibia, who had to wage an armed struggle for their independence, and Zimbabwe, armed struggle and so you do get these memory incidents of elephants, particularly the matriarchs, who won't herd their herds into those places, but stick to poor, dry Botswana. We are also pretty positive about it. We can develop tourism policies, and we invite you to come and visit and see these elephants. So the more you give us money, when you come visit, the more we're able to spend in the compensation and finding alternative livelihoods for those persons the elephants displace. Otherwise, the wisdom you give me will be most welcome. How do you manage?
Can I ask what was the response of the people you offered to give 20 elephants to?
I'm still waiting. I'm still waiting. You know, recently the British Parliament, I mean, just the last week or so, they passed a bill banning the exportation of trophies into the UK. You know, let's accept it. In the world, there will always be people who are pro-hunting, and there will be those who are anti-hunting. Put yourself in the position of Botswana and the enormity of wildlife species that we have kept for the world. Should we not share it with the world? And we behave responsibly with the resources, the proceeds that come from that. So, you know, we really do need a break.
Mr. President, after the 1989 re-democratization process in Africa, when many African countries became, you know, independent or introduced plural democracy, you know, and ended one-party rule and military rule and the rest, the world was happy that things were improving in Africa. But in the last decade, you know, there has been some kind of return. You know, there is a phenomenon of military coups in West Africa, you know, president for life in different disguises in some parts of the continent. So I have two questions. The first is, what would you suggest as an antidote to the phenomenon of what has been described as hybrid democracy or authoritarian democracy in Africa? And the second is, what's your projection for the future of democracy in Africa in the context of recent experience?
Well, you know, we remain deeply concerned about the backsliding of democratic practice in Africa. And so we partnered with the institutions like the National Democratic Institute and seek to grow and deepen a coalition of like-minded leaders across Africa to deliberately interrogate this very question. And in interrogating it, promote the values that we think work best for people. We in Botswana remain steadfast. We're deeply committed to term limits. We're deeply committed to constitutional order. We're deeply committed to democratic practice. And that's what we pitch as what works. Part of the reason why you've had these conflicts, in our view, is precisely because of a lack of respect of the very constitutions by which some of those came into power. And so we need to find more partners to help us make these values more of a ubiquity in Africa. But it's not in Africa alone, as you might have learned. We have realized that some of those that we looked up to seem to face similar challenges. And so when we cast the net and look at everything, we must be deeply and unapologetically objective. You know, a backslide in democratic dispensation is a backslide. It doesn't matter where it takes place. And it's concerning. And speaking from the privilege of being a president, I honestly have never understood why anybody wants to be president for so long. I can't. You know, this thing really alters your life completely. And if you long to get your life back, you want to get out of that and do your bit and get out. So I need to get into the minds of these other colleagues of mine. Who, for lack of a better term, do crazy things.
Mr. President, do you sometimes ask them when you meet them?
I haven't met the crazy ones yet. Perhaps I've met the ones who would be crazy, but I haven't discovered they're going to be crazy yet. But no, speaking seriously, it really, really disturbs me. Some countries have attempted a raft of things. They've attempted to put in place incentives you incentivize somebody to leave office, you know. I find that just, unacceptable. If you have a pension scheme or you have a scheme by which you can, get comfort beyond your service, that really ought to be enough. Because the first thing we must recognize is that we come into this job as an elected official. Elected. And therefore it means you can be unelected. And being unelected means you're out of a job. At least a job you thought you had. So go home.
Mr. President, you are a fan of Rutgers Scarlet Knights football team.
Sorry?
I know that you are a fan of Rutgers the Scarlet Knights football team, and I know you attended Florida State, so I'm wondering how you became their fan.
You know, I'm from Botswana, and we play soccer. So, you know, when I got there for a while, they called it football, and I didn't see football. I saw a lot more ball handling. But, you know, as would be with any university student, when your team plays, you root for it. And luckily for me, the Seminoles were the Seminoles at the time under Bobby Bowden. How could I not? They were on a winning streak. They beat you all, didn't they? I spoke like a Southerner there, didn't I?
Thank you, Mr. President. We will now open it up to the audience for a few questions for the audience. Who has the microphone? Where's the microphone? Okay, it's here. So please raise your hand, and once you identify, can you please mention your name and what you do, and then, please be brief with the questions. We don't want long comments. Yeah, there's someone here at the back. Oh, there's a standing mic. So please walk over here.
Good evening, Mr. President. My name is Mariama. I'm a second-year MBA, and I'm from the Republic of Guinea. My question is around knowledge sharing within the African Union. So I come from a country where we have the largest deposit of iron ore and the second largest bauxite exporter, and I think that the Botswana model would be beneficial to implement in Guinea, for instance. So how do you think about knowledge sharing within the African Union? Thank you.
Can we have, yes, another question so Mr. President can take 2 questions at a time?
Hello, Mr. President. I'm Matthew Simonson. I am a postdoctoral fellow in political science here at Penn, and I've had the joy of visiting your country, which is the most beautiful in Africa that I've explored. And one of the most beautiful places I went to was the area where the hunter-gatherers, who we sometimes in the West call the Bushmen or the San, who call themselves names I can't really pronounce because of all the click sounds in them, live. And I was wondering how they fit into your vision for development. In order to become a highly developed country economically, does this require these people to settle in one place, to become farmers, to move to the city? Or is there a place in your vision for them to continue, if they wish, to move around nomadically and pursue hunting and gathering as they have for thousands of years?
Thank you. So Mr. President will answer the first 2 questions, and they will take another set.
All right, thank you. Marianne, first question. Knowledge sharing. Botswana is an open encyclopedia and reference laboratory. When I go to the African Union Assembly, as I did this year, and we gather in the coffee room with colleagues, we have our ambassador who is resident there with the other ambassadors. One of the things that Botswana should be well known for, and I say this publicly again, is that we're willing, we are wanting, desirous of, sharing that which people want to get out of Botswana in terms of our developmental experience. We have even put in place programs with countries that had specifically come to us to want to find out how we did it. Government-to-government interactions, we are more than happy to do that. Not only are we willing to do that, we have tertiary institutions. So when you finish here at UPenn, come over to the University of Botswana, come over to BUST, come over to any of our universities and carry out research. With digital technology, you could still do it from here. And you will find us welcoming and open. And some of the things that I laid out in the lecture I gave speak for themselves. the prerequisites in terms of the governance structure, and even the licensing, the engagement of various mining companies, and what you do with the proceeds. All these need all to be ticked. So you can come study it, the governments can come and engage with us, they can come talk to companies that we have, our legislation is digitized, you can look it up, and so we're more than willing to share our experiences. But it's not only with developing countries, such as Africa, we're willing to share with the developed world, and even developing partners. You're welcome anytime, you and your country, and everybody else. Matthew, yeah, there we are. Thanks for visiting my country, and I'm really cherished and cheesed that you found it as beautiful. I think you only forgot to say when you're next coming back. But in terms of how the so-called Bushmen fit into honor, they are citizens bearing all the rights that I do. So they can choose where they want to live. They can choose to live in a settled space where that is permitted. They can choose to gather and be nomadic. They cannot choose certain things, like myself. They cannot choose to want to have both. If you have a game reserve, for instance, they've got to live by the dictates of what is allowed and what is not allowed in a game reserve. And typically, we would not allow permanent structures, right? But we also are mindful that their way of life, for them to thrive and experience the longevity that we do, the good health that we do, the opportunities that all of us do, would need to forego some of the things that they practice. And part of it is education. Where does the right of a parent to take a child out of school and wander in dangerous terrain, uneducated, insufficient health provision, where do those rights end and where do the rights of the child begin? And so Botswana state, like any state, would have to intervene to protect the potential that child has and their rights. And so they enjoy the rights that we all do, and we also get a little concerned when it sometimes happens where those who claim to speak on their behalf but not practice their lifestyle want to relegate them to almost prehistoric existence and types, and they become nothing but exotic tourism objects. That to which I say no.
Hi, Mr. President. My name is Kelsey Glancy. I am extremely lucky to be traveling to your country next week. I'll be living there for 3 months, and I'll be working alongside your nurses there at Princess Marina Hospital. This is an extension of the BUP program through Children's Hospital Philadelphia to build a nurse partnership over there, because you guys have already done a wonderful job building a doctor partnership. I wanted to know, what are your hopes for your healthcare system on your country's way to their 2036 goal to be a high-income country? Thank you.
Yes, one more question for this round at the back.
Thank you.
Oh, okay.
Thank you so much, Mr. President, for a very engaging talk. My name is Chimeze Dixon, and I'm from Uganda, that country where we have had a single president for 37 years. There's a saying that goes around in Africa that being president is like riding on the back of a lion. You don't let go, because if you let go, it will most likely eat you up. And that is one of the reasons that presidents don't retire. I agree with you that more and more presidents are retiring now, but my question is, how is Africa prepared, or African countries prepared, to manage former presidents retiring within the same country?
Thank you. Can we take one more, Mr. President?
You can take one more.
Okay. Yes, at the back.
Hi, I'm Chinalo Ibekwe. I am Nigerian. I am a data science master student at Penn here. If I'm correct, it seems like Botswana is the only country in Southern Africa that still maintains the death penalty, at least based on articles I've read online. I'm just curious as to why that is and like what your thought is, what's your thought process on still maintaining the death penalty in the country? Thank you.
Thank you.
You want me to answer?
Yes, please.
All right. Happily so. Was it Kelsey? Going to Botswana for 3 months soon. And the question, I think, was on what my hopes are for the health delivery system. I'm really glad you asked that question because earlier on I had a discussion with the leadership of UPenn, who have had a remarkable partnership with us for more than 2 decades, and it's growing. And I'm really glad that you are part of it. You know, you here at UPenn have the privilege of experiencing a high-end tertiary healthcare system. You here at UPenn have the benefit of a long-lasting, a well-established, entrenched health capacitation or training system. You here at UPenn have the privilege of being an Ivy League, i.e. you attract the best and you have the best. You here at UPenn have the privilege of being coming from a wealthy first world country. We in Botswana have the privilege of having wonderful diplomatic ties to the United States and the people of the United States. And, you know, with friends, what you can do together is beyond measure. And so this partnership is built on those foundations. You know, we share values, we like each other, simply. We've been committed to partnering so that we can have a symbiotic relationship where we exchange and share. Botswana presents to UPenn a dynamic environment which you don't have here in the US. And even the opportunities for research are amazing. Sadly, and sad as it is, you know, at one time we were the highest burdened country with HIV and AIDS in the world. And, you know, for any curious scientist, you want to jump right into that in terms of, you know, academic pursuits. So we present that. We also present a safe environment for Americans to go out and broaden their knowledge, not just students, but also for your academic leaders. And so my hope is that this relationship is made more dynamic, it's deepened, and we do our bit. And part of doing that requires us to have frank engagements. What can we do to make you succeed more? As UPenn, at UPenn, and UPenn away from UPenn doing UPenn work. What can we do? What can you do to make us successful in the delivery of the healthcare systems in terms of the skills, the tools, technology, the techniques, the systems of management and governance, but also bearing in mind that we are a third world developing country. And so the unit cost of provision of health, for instance, should not be structured the same way as you have it here, because we're more about the inclusion of, rather than providing tertiary exclusive care to a very limited few. We've got a lot more to achieve. So thanks, and I commend you for being part of this partnership. And, you know, call on us, and we'll make your life happy in Botswana, and encourage others to come. UPenn also presents an opportunity for our students to come and learn here, for our faculty to come and learn here. for co-investigation and publication. So my hope is that this partnership really broadens and deepens and goes beyond health. There are other sectors, there are other, areas of investigation, because, you are renowned for your capacity to do things. So we also always want to associate with the best, and who wouldn't? Who wouldn't? It makes sense. I think it was Chimidze Jackson, if I mispronounced, you must correct me, from Uganda. I will only take note of the 30-something years that you made mention of, and then proceed to suggest to you that the various countries, including the engagements that I spoke to earlier on, such as through our partnership and work with the National Democratic Institute, interrogates these questions. How do you, make it beneficial for a former head of state to remain committed to the constitutional provisions, i.e. term limit, or even the limitation of term caused by an election, respect for an election. And part of that, requires making sure that through engagement, people embrace democratic ideals, democratic attributes. One of the most important is that even before you get into an electoral contest, you must begin by respecting the rules therein. And part of the rules are that if you are the loser, respect loss. Accept and embrace loss. If you have been given an opportunity through an electoral system, accept that it's not forever. There is termination, and embrace termination. Embrace the ideal that others other than yourself should also occupy the space you occupied. It's extremely important, I don't like pushing the rewards mechanism. You get paid so much, you get given this and that, and why should people be bribed to, why should... You see, this audience is going to get me into trouble just now. But why should people be rewarded, given pecuniary rewards for, that's a better word, pecuniary rewards. Why should they be given rewards for doing what they are supposed to do? And more than anything else, why should their rights override the rights of so many people? It's just disrespectful of people to serve beyond their term. It's disrespectful for people not to accept that others have beaten them. It's just disrespectful, and that's why we perhaps even ought to provide in various constitutions sanction for persons who dare even come close to threatening those provisions. And they must sign up for that, sentencing included, before they even get into a contest. And then there's a question from, I don't know if I got your name right, Klimele Cello, sorry, thank you. You say we're the only country that's practicing the death penalty. For us, it's not a comparative issue. It's a fact. We do have the death penalty in Botswana because it's in the law. But you see, the death penalty in Botswana must not be taken whimsically or be perceived to be frivolously undertaken. There is, first of all, due process within that law. And let me just let you know how it actually occurs in Botswana. First, there's got to be an indisputable determination of the existence of a predetermined, premeditated murder, occurrence of murder, which is not very easy to prove. Outside that threshold being met, nobody would be put to death. And so when every avenue has been exhausted and there's been complete proof that the murder an accused may have occasioned was predetermined, planned, executed successfully, and no extenuating circumstance, only and only then would you be sentenced to death. 2, every person accused of murder, a crime carrying the capital punishment, the only one, not the only one, the crime carrying capital punishment such as murder, the state ensures you have legal representation, pro deal. Nobody gets taken through a judicial process on the accusation of murder without representation, unless, of course, they reject such representation, and the state would pay. And 3, persons so accused and sentenced by a lower court have every right to carry their appeal as a right to the highest level with representation, including appealing to the president, not me, the president, for clemency. And the provision in the law is such that there is a committee of clemency. It's never determined by a president alone. So there's rigor in it. And that's why you'll find the number of persons who actually are put to death to be fairly low. But even having said that, this is a value that got put in law, which we also were taught by none other than the Brits, and we so embraced it. But it's negotiable because we are a democratic country. We just had a constitutional review. If Botswana decided to reject the death penalty, it would be so rejected because of our commitment to democratic practice. I think that was it.
That's the last question. At this point, let's join me in thanking Mr. President. Can you please? Thank you very much, Mr. President. We now invite my colleague, the Director of the Center for Africana Studies, to offer the vote of thanks.
Thank you. First and foremost, I'd like to thank His Excellency President Masisi for his insightful and informative lecture, and then for the wonderful conversation with my colleague, Professor Adebanwi. We hope that our partnership with the Republic of Botswana continues to grow and flourish, and we appreciate you taking the time to visit with us and share some of the keys to Botswana's impressive record of economic development and good governance. I'd like to thank the staff of the Republic of Botswana's embassy, Ambassador Mokgweetsi, the staff at the Center for Africana Studies, and my colleague, Professor Adebanwi, for bringing this event to fruition. I'd also like to thank the Office of the President of the University of Pennsylvania, Liz McGill, and all of our co-sponsors who worked tirelessly and on fairly short notice as these things go to make it happen, and that's Perry Worldhouse, Penn Global, the Perlman School of Medicine, and Wharton Africa. And last but not least, I'd like to thank our student volunteers. Before we finish, I would like to offer this gift on behalf of the center.
You are so kind. Thank you. Brilliant.
And a word before people start moving around. 3 things. First, thank you for joining us. We hope that you will join us again next month when we host the Vice President of Nigeria. 2, There is a public reception in the student lounge that'll be to your left when you walk out. But 3, I'm going to ask that you all stand and wait until His Excellency has exited the stage. So thank you all for coming and have a good evening.
Will you choose position?
Sure.
Sure.
Yes.
I think that was provocation that merits a response. And so my wife, my dear wife, who couldn't be here, had prepared a gift, and luckily she asked that I give it to you. The director of the center, for your wonderful organization and hosting this. And so this is from my wife and the people of Botswana to you. And look at the stick that I'm opening there. Can you open it?
The president has requested that you open it. That's why we're waiting.
Oh, wow.
It just turns. It comes from a long way, so we have to wrap it well. Thank you. It's almost gratuitous, isn't it?
So thank you very much. Please wait while Mr. President exits the stage. Thank you again.